Hello, welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a while, I've been very busy in the last month developing my own games, but I wanted to do a short video here showing you the collection that I've accumulated over the last year. I started collecting last summer and I really just started with getting my favorite game that I got for cheap and just searching for prizes and what you have to pay for these games, and well, it spiraled maybe a bit out of control, and now I have a collection of mostly point-and-click adventure games because that's my favorite genre and that's what I wanted to talk about today. So I'm going through those games one by one, talking about the games, talking about my experience with them, talking about the boxes and the artwork, and also what the whole state of the collection is, what I may be missing out still, what I'm still looking for, and why I have selected those games that I have here behind me. So without further ado, let's have a look at those games.
Now the first question, why did I even start collecting? Last year I visited RMC The Cave in England and I've seen all those big boxes from the games that I played in my youth, and well, I kind of got a bit jealous. It was really nice to have them back in my hand, look at them, and I thought maybe it's possible to get a few of those myself. Didn't really want to start a collection or anything, but just have my favorites or maybe the ones I could afford. And that's when I just started looking on eBay when I was watching TV, had nothing else to do, maybe it wasn't that interesting, and browsed eBay to see how much you have to pay, and I was, well, positively surprised to see that at least a few of those games were really affordable, and before long they arrived at my doorstep. The second reason was that I had these shelves and I had all assortment of decoration stuff in there, but it was really chaotic, not following any logic, or I just put stuff in there that I thought that kind of looked nice. And the idea was that with having a small collection of games in there, that it would be more coherent and just something that reminds me of the old times and it's nice to look at. So generally for me it's not so much about playing those old games, because obviously there are easier ways to obtain those in a playable state, but more for the box art and the nostalgia looking at them and the decorational value. So I wanted to start with the Space Quest series, because Space Quest 3 was actually the first game that I bought with my own money back then. It's not the greatest game, I have to admit. I was never able to finish it back then until I bought the walkthrough book or the hint book for it, and all the other Space Quest games as well. And with that I was able to complete it, and I really liked it for the world and the whole atmosphere and the humor in it. But yeah, the puzzles and all the dead ends that you can run into is really frustrating if you actually try to play the game just by yourself. But yeah, it was the first game I played back then that I had really in a box, so obviously I spent a lot of time on it when I spent my own money on it, and I would not give up easily as I would probably do today. The artwork for these boxes is really exceptional, especially the emboss effect on the cover of the Space Quest 3. And also the backside of the box is really well designed. I really like that. As you might have already seen from the stickers on the boxes, those are not all PC games. Sometimes I had to go with Atari or Amiga versions of the game because those were cheaper. And I generally try to get a good deal on those games because sometimes they are extremely expensive. But I got lucky, I think, with Space Quest 3 and paid a lot less than it sometimes goes for on eBay. Sticking with Sierra at the moment, the next big series that I'm a huge fan of is the Leisure Suit Larry series. Especially the 6th game is really one of my favorite point-and-click adventures of all time. The older ones can be a bit abstruse and have their normal Sierra quirks from that time, but later on the 6th and 7th game of the series were really more refined from a gameplay perspective, and especially the 6th game I think has a really great art style. I love the high-res version of the game. The CD version has SVGA graphics, and that's why I got the CD version. That was important to me, and I think it really shines to have that old school pixel art but have it at a higher resolution. You can think of the humor whatever you want, I still think it's funny. But maybe I've just never really grown up out from the 90s, so that's maybe just me. The artworks of the game boxes are quite similar. You always have big face Larry staring on the box. I mean, you would want that. And then you have the hot girls and the overall good vibes, maybe the tropical vacation feeling that you want from those games. And I think they make a great decoration on the shelf. Now from the Police Quest series I only have the first game right now, but I just bought the fourth game, but I'm still waiting for it to arrive. But I've got another game from Jim Walls, codename Iceman, but I never actually played that. I just got that in a collection that I bought for free, more or less. What I really like about that is the shiny emboss effect on the title, so I decided to just put it next to Police Quest at the moment. The first Police Quest game was actually the first adventure game that I've ever played. I still remember that I sat down with a dictionary, German to English, from my mother, and I tried to type in all the words and was just happy when the text parser even recognized it. So you can imagine I didn't get really far in that game, but I still got some fond memories of it. Now, if you've watched my top 25 point-and-click adventure game, you know what big of a fan I am of EchoQuest. So I had to get my hands on it. And that was quite difficult because the game was not really sold well in Germany, and there are also different kind of box arts there, and I really wanted to go for the blue one because I think it just looks a lot better than the white one. I still don't really know what's the difference between those two versions. Maybe one was only for Europe and the other US, or one is a re-release, but I'm really glad that at one point I got the chance to get my hands on it, and now I'm a proud owner and I display it on my shelf. The game is just really beautiful and it has this very nice relaxing vibe and all this beautiful artwork, and I'm really a sucker for everything that's underwater, so the theme was immediately vibing with me, and the puzzles are not too complicated, you can't die in the game, which is really nice. And I just enjoyed the whole positive vibe with it and the great music as well. Two more classic Sierra games, Freddy Farkas and King's Quest VII. Freddy Farkas is really a funny game, has great artworks, and if you're into Western and if you're into Elf's humor, you can't go really wrong with it. I really enjoyed the character art in the game as well as on the box art. And the little town you play in feels really alive with all those quirky characters. King's Quest VII, on the other hand, is the only game I got from the series because, well, it's the only game that I played back then, and I'm also not such a big fan of the whole King's Quest series. I always felt that the setting was a bit meh. I mean, that's down to personal preference, but I couldn't really get into that fairy style and medieval fantasy setting. Completing my Sierra collection are these three FMV games, Phantasmagoria 1 and 2 and Gabriel Knight 2. The Phantasmagoria games are really great. I do love me some cheesy FMV games, and those really deliver on that front. I actually prefer the second one, even though the first was more popular, I think, but the second one dials up the cheese to 11 and I just like the main actor more. Gabriel Knight 2 is also a really interesting game because it plays in Bavaria, and I actually currently live in Bavaria, so it's really funny to see how the state is depicted there. I do prefer the first game though, just from a gameplay perspective and especially from the story, because I'm totally into all this voodoo stuff, but unfortunately the first game is really expensive to get hold of, so maybe I'll be lucky sometime in the future, but I'm just not willing to spend 100-200 euros on that. The box art of these games are, like many from that time, not that great. I think I prefer the hand-drawn box art from the older games, but they do represent the cheesy FMV content quite faithfully. Now, at the start of the video I was talking about being busy creating my own game, which just happened to be a point-and-click adventure game, so I thought it would be okay to insert it here. It's called Zarathustra Cybergeddon. You play as an FBI agent in a cyberpunk meets Lovecraftian setting, and it's completely free to download on Steam or for Android on Google Play. You can get the links in the video description below. And now let's get back to the main video. LucasArts, the second behemoth next to Sierra, produced some really hilarious adventure games. I probably don't need to introduce Sam & Max, Day of the Tentacle or Grim Fandango to any one of you. These classics are still one of my favorite games of all time. I did actually still own the CD and jewel case for Sam & Max, and I was really happy when I got the box and the manual for low price. The artworks of the boxes are much more cartoony, but that's what you would expect from the art style of the games themselves. Only the box art from Grim Fandango stands out a bit because that comes from a time when it was more common to have these collages of 3D models instead of a hand-painted artwork. I did not get my hands on a box of the first Manic Mansion game, but that's not too bad for me because I didn't play that back then. But I did at least get something for Zack McCracken, though not the original box but this compilation, but I only paid $20 for it, so that was much cheaper than getting the original. Now we're getting to a selection of absolute classics: Loom, Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis and Monkey Island. I was really surprised to get a good deal on Loom, which even included the audio drama on cassette. And for Indiana Jones, you can see that big OEM label which tells you that you're not allowed to sell this game. I think that's probably the reason why it was a bit cheaper, but generally I don't mind these stickers as long as they are not in the middle of the artwork. I haven't played Loom in a while, so I think I have to get back to that, but I did recently play Fate of Atlantis on my Embernic on vacation at the beach, which was a surprisingly good experience. I also replayed the first 3 Monkey Island games for my top 25 point-and-click adventure game series, but as you can see I'm missing Secret of Monkey Island still. I'm a bit hesitant to dish out huge amounts of money for that, but I would really love to have it in my collection, so I'm keeping my eyes open. For the artworks, Monkey Island 2 LeChuck's Revenge is really my favorite. All those little details and the intimidating zombie pirate are looking really great. And I have this memory where I visited the Toys R Us with my parents and I had the game in my hand that it just recently came out and it was really expensive, so I always felt that this was a real premium game. Now last but definitely not least, a selection of adventure games from various game developers. The great sequel Simon the Sorcerer 2, Sherlock Holmes and the Case of the Rose Tattoo, The Riddle of Master Lu and Sanitarium. I still don't understand why the first Simon the Sorcerer game has such a good reputation and so few people are talking about its sequel. To me, the original game was very abstruse and I didn't think that it was that interesting, but the second part, on the other hand, has some really great puzzles and also the locations and characters are much more interesting to me, and even the corny fourth wall breaking humor works for me better in the sequel. But, well, everyone has their own taste and mine is probably also not the best in some regards. Sherlock Holmes and the Riddle of Master Lu are most interesting to me because of their art style. I'm a bit of a sucker for these digitized characters. I think they really have their very own aesthetic. If you can walk around with a real-life actor, that's also why I really dig the fourth Police Quest game. I don't know what it is, maybe it just takes me back to a time where I thought that this was really some fascinating next-gen tech or something. The last game, Sanitarium, is a bit of a special case because I hadn't played or even heard of the game back then, but I learned in the last few years that the game has some kind of good reputation, so when I was able to grab it for cheap, I took the chance and then I actually played through the whole game, and yes, I can see why it's such a beloved cult classic for some people. It's extremely cheesy, especially the German localization or voiceovers are so cringe and strange that it's more a comedy game than any horror or maybe more serious game, even though it deals with some serious issues. But it's really creative. You have all these different locations you go through and you never really know what's going to happen next. If you've enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel for more retro videos in the future and give the video a like. Now that has been my point-and-click adventure collection, or my collection so far. There are still some holes I'd like to fill, but I'm actually running out of space a bit, so I have to be very specific with the games that I'm going for. Do you still own some big box games from the time back then? Or do you think that I'm really missing out on some games here? Then just let me know in the comments below. And until then, see ya!